because you know what? I already been seeing all these champs right now. We'll see where they're at in 3 years. I bet you I'll still be here. They're going to be.
One name in the UFC is the most terrifying to fighters. From Stockton, California, he enjoys fighting and holds nothing back. Nate Diaz may be a fan favorite in MMA, but he's also one of the most difficult fighters to face due to his extreme cardio, tough mentality, and lethal finishing ability.
You know what's the real fight? What's the real money fight is me, not these clowns that you already punked at the press conference.
Nate has also created a reputation outside of the octagon. Therefore, stay tuned as we explain why fighters are truly terrified of Nate Diaz. First up, flirting the ropes. We cannot discuss Nate Diaz without also discussing his brother Nick. Nick introduced his younger brother to martial arts at a young age as a means of keeping him out of trouble.
No, he's hiding somewhere. I don't know where this motherfucker is at.
But it quickly evolved into much more. Nick began his professional MMA career in 2001, and within 2 years of fighting in the UFC, his record in the UFC was uneven, but he earned a scary reputation with victories against Robbie Lawler. Unfortunately, Nick's career has been stunted by positive drug tests, but not the usual performance-enhancing kind. Nick was suspended and fined for testing positive for marijuana at Pride FC.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
Then, in 2012, he tested positive for marijuana again, this time at the UFC 3 years later. The same thing happened. These occurrences have derailed what would have otherwise been a more successful career. Nate has also had his own issues with the UFC over drug testing and salaries, but he's never been punished for a positive test. The two even manage a CBD firm together and are staunch marijuana advocates. While they may be peaceful while smoking, they have cultivated a strong, no-nonsense reputation throughout the years that makes people hesitant to confront them, shocking the world. Most MMA fans were familiar with Nate Diaz well before 2016. He was introduced to the rest of the world when he replaced Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 196. It was the defining moment of Diaz's career, as his opponent was the global superstar Conor McGregor. McGregor was unbeaten in the UFC and was coming off a spectacular 13-second knockout of Jose Aldo. Moving up to welterweight, McGregor was attempting to solidify his place in MMA history. Many of the 1.5 million viewers expected McGregor to add another victory to his record, and the Irishman was a heavy favorite. However, true MMA fans knew better than to bet against Nate Diaz. McGregor caught him several times with his famed left hand, but it was not enough to throw Nate off balance. The first round fizzled out with 2 minor explosions, but the second round was where things got truly exciting. McGregor began to worry, and Nate, being Nate, took full advantage of catching the famed fighter off guard, hammering him so hard that he attempted a desperate takedown. Despite Rogan's earlier warning that it would be a poor idea, Diaz swiftly took control, controlling McGregor before finishing the fight with a rear naked choke. Nate famously stated in his post-fight interview that he was not surprised, as evidenced by his bout with McGregor, Nate can go the distance. And he's frequently able to separate himself from his opponents with his relentless cardio. Considering that Nate only agreed to fight with a week and a half's notice, that triumph was all the more impressive. One of his strength and conditioning trainers remarked that it required a great deal of effort in a short period of time to get him fight ready. But Nate never faltered. After defeating McGregor, he engaged in brief bursts of activity as frequently as possible throughout the week. Nate stated he was slow to start the bout, but ultimately won through endurance. His iron chin withstood McGregor's pinpoint strikes. He was able to conserve enough energy for the second round, which is not surprising if you're familiar with Nate's fitness regimen.
So I know my man's a gangster, but he ain't no West Coast gangster.
Nate has competed in triathlons, which are ultra-endurance sports comprising swimming, cycling, running throughout his whole career, despite the fact that he and his brother Nick are not world-class triathletes. This type of training has shown to be extremely beneficial. Nate Diaz has taken 13 of his 27 UFC fights to the final bell, and he's only been knocked out twice in his whole career. Not only does he take battles to the finish line, but he also maintains a high level throughout the fight, as Conor McGregor saw firsthand, training like a champion. Nate Diaz is constant, unlike the new UFC star Paddy Pimblett, who gained almost 40 pounds following a fight this year. He requested to replace Rafael dos Anjos in UFC 196. Dana White stated that Nate was training for a triathlon, which is entirely accurate. He revealed that he was actually on a beach and drinking tequila in combination. Nate's approach is to always be prepared for a fight, and he stated that on his worst day, he'll practice for 2 hours. He does not have many hobbies because he's constantly working and practicing. Professional triathlete Damian Gonzalez, who has worked with the Diaz brothers for years, is one of his trainers. Nate Diaz has been a dedicated vegan since he was 18 years old, which may come as a surprise to some MMA fans. Gonzalez also disclosed that the minimum number of daily exercises is 2, plus weight training. In an interview about his diet, he attributed much of his success to his meat and animal-free diet. According to him, eating meat will only slow you down. When Nate Diaz defeated Conor McGregor in their first fight, Diaz was quick to point out that McGregor got his ass kicked by a vegan. His response to vegan critics is that he trains harder than anyone else, in 8 triathlons, numerous training sessions each day, and some of the most dramatic UFC brawls confirm this case. Nate's ground game. Nate can remain on his feet and exchange punches all day, but his true expertise lies on the ground. Nate got his 3rd degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt last year, but it's difficult to dispute that he deserves it. In the last 2 decades, BJJ has become a key component of MMA, and Nate began training at an early age. Nate began studying under Cesar Gracie at the age of 14, became one of Cesar's greatest students, and went on to represent his country in the Pan American Jiu-Jitsu Championship, where he won a silver medal. This training prepared him excellently for mixed martial arts. In fact, he's so confident in his jiu-jitsu abilities that after setting up a triangle choke against Kurt Pellegrino, he won the match by submission. Before finishing the fight, he had time to rejoice and deliver a 2-fingered salute to the crowd. Nate is virtually always in perfect control whenever a fight is carried to the ground, and his enthusiasm for BJJ endures to this day. Nate and his brother Nick operate a BJJ school in their hometown of Stockton, California, so if you want to experience what it's like for McGregor to get strangled, pop by for a session. Nate never retreats.
Stockton, California, baby, you already know what's up.
Nate Diaz goes to war not only in the octagon, but also in the lead up to fights and backstage at events. He never initiates conflict. Nate has incidents with Khabib Nurmagomedov, Brendan Schaub, and Dana White revealed that he was almost the victim of a Nate Diaz brawl in a nightclub. You don't want to be on the wrong side of Nate Diaz at the Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley boxing match, where he made fans build their drinks by faking a punch. It appears that he had insulted Nate and provoked him. After Jason Miller wrecked their teammate's victory moment, it was probably not a good idea for the Diaz brothers to fight one of the hardest men in mixed martial arts for the Strikeforce middleweight championship. Miller demanded a rematch with Jake Shields, but Eddie alleged that Nick and Nate intervened to teach Miller a lesson. Eventually, the bout was broken up and everyone involved was given massive fights, and CBS terminated its deal with the MMA company. It served as a reminder that the Stockton lads are united and do not tolerate disrespect lightly. Nate Diaz fought a reporter backstage at UFC 276. Full Stand reporter Sean Beck had apparently previously insulted one of Nate's trade partners online. When Mac approached Nate for an interview, Nate slapped the microphone out of Mac's hand and his cap off his head. So do you believe that Nate Diaz is one of the best UFC fighters of all time? Let me know in the comments section down below.